Hello, welcome to everybody who has joined us. Thank you for your patience there with our very slight technological shenanigans, but we are here and we are ready to go. So you are here with myself, Ruth from Autistic Parents UK, and the marvellous Kieran Rose, who actually these days we can probably say also from Autistic Parents UK, but also from books and proper academic research papers and all kinds of exciting things. So we are going to be talking about entering autistic parenthood. This one was my idea because I looked back over our webinars and over our lives, and I thought actually we don't really talk much about the beginning. Probably partly because you and I and a lot of people in the group and a lot of people who interact with us in the peer support space have got older kids, and it was a while ago. But I thank you very much, Bobby. Bobby's put a link for Kieran's absolutely marvellous book that he wrote with Dr. Amy Pearson. So do have a little look at that if you have a chance. But yeah, so I thought, we are starting to interact with people earlier on, and it might be useful for us to kind of ruminate a little bit on that past experience.
Remember those golden years.
And I think, I'm not sure actually, I might be wrong. I think we approach it from two different angles as well, because I had all of my children, and I've got 4 kids, and I had all of my children before I found out that I was autistic. But did you know before you had any of your kids?
Yes, I wasn't enormously and tremendously self-aware, but I had known for 7, 8 years.
Okay.
So quite some time, just wandering around in the fog of unknownness, but knowing.
Sure. Yeah, and we come, I mean, we all start off in that place, don't we, of kind of, and what does this mean? Do you think that impacted your decision at all to have children, either way?
Are we post-watershed? We're all adults here, aren't we?
Fine. Even on the Facebook page, it will be fine.
I mean, with not really. I mean, my wife and I talked about children, significantly talked about children, and I think there was never a conscious decision to have children, but it was always, I think it was just an assumption that we would, but we didn't really think enormously deeply about it. And the first one particularly, but the other two as well, all of them were pleasant surprises, let's put it that way. And the first one particularly so, who apparently appeared on our pre-wedding week because we got married abroad. And a significant amount of tequila was involved as well. So we were then not the best way to prepare for a baby, and not the best way to introduce a baby into the world either. I wouldn't recommend. But yeah, so it was it wasn't like a conscious decision or anything, but it definitely having, I mean, obviously I know your recognition of being autistic came a bit late, but for me, actually the birth of my first child was what sparked the fog to go away and for me to start actually exploring what that meant. So there was a real kind of kickstart there for me. So I kind of like to think that when it comes to kind of recognizing that I was autistic, although I had that label at the age of like 23, I was a lot younger. But actually I can see it from the perspective of people that didn't know into kind of much later adulthood, because although I knew, it didn't really mean anything to me, and I hadn't explored it at any depth for a very long time. So therefore I didn't know anything about myself or anything really at that point.
Yes. Yeah. And as I say, I kind of came to it the other way, that I had all my children first. But I wonder whether that means that I kind of did it twice, that I entered parenthood and then I entered autistic parenthood.
Yeah.
Bobby's made the lovely point there that that they counted that they raised their children all ADHD before they realised. Thanks, Kieran. Yeah, I think there was always elements of that with me, that even though I didn't know at all actually for any of us that we were all autistic actually, as it turns out. I was always really drawn to gentle parenting and always really drawn to my children being autonomous, and I definitely did things that I wish that I hadn't, but I think that
Oh,
that's
God, yeah.
quite hard to not be a parent, and you only learn by doing it really wrong, don't you?
Yeah, yeah, and significantly with your if you have more than one, it's the first one that you make a lot of the mistakes
Oh
with.
man.
And by the time if you decide to, if you're batty enough like me and Ruth to go on and have multiple children, then by the time you get to the later ones, it's just like they look after themselves and bring themselves. They don't really, but you're a lot more laid back around kind of what happens around them and decisions around them. And ironically, even though I've got three, really laid back about the youngest. The first one was still hyper conscious, kind of around a little bit, because he's the one that's going out and groundbreaking in a way for the three
Yeah,
of them. He's
yeah.
leading the way in terms of having different experiences at and obviously an age that they're not yet out. So it's just weird how you treat all three of them differently, even though they're having, I don't know, I'm waffling, but you know what I mean.
I know I can't remember who it was, but I have seen in a parenting book, quote along the lines of every one of your children will have a different parent,
Mm.
because you will be different to your, and I think in some ways that can actually be quite healthy, because our children are different, so we should be treating them differently, because we should be aiming to meet their various needs. But I know personally I always find it hardest with my eldest, pretty much because he presents new needs, and I don't know what that need is. I just know that he's dysregulated and that something's going on, and then it's all trial and error. What do we do now?
Yeah.
And then you work it out. But then when the next child presents with a similar at about a similar age, you go, it's probably this.
Hmm.
We've done this before. I can meet this quite easily. It doesn't mean that they don't throw up new challenges.
Absolutely not. I think also it's you kind of you live within your own experience, don't you? And so it's kind of like, I think very early on I was always trying to draw on, well, what happened to me when I was a child? Well, what did I experience when this was happening to me? But the world has changed so much in
Yes.
the last kind of few decades that actually our children are having incredibly different experiences as children than we had as children. Although
Yes.
some things are obviously familiar and similar, but other things are like, obviously computers didn't exist when we were kids. So so there's a whole world of tech out there that wasn't there before, and children exist within that. Social media obviously didn't exist, and all those kind of things. So I think there are so many new challenges that are new to us as humans, but also new to us as parents, and that can complicate things even more because you've got no experience to draw from.
Yeah.
Whereas previous generations probably did have similar childhoods,
Yeah.
so therefore could draw on those.
Yeah. Time is speeding up, isn't it, in how quickly things change.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find this, and this is I'm not going to go on too much of a tangent, but it is part of the reason why I home educate, was because I found school for my children so different than what I did in school, and it just seemed very, very extreme to me.
Mm-hmm.
So it was only my eldest that went to school, but things like he was learning not just nouns and verbs at 6, but he was learning openers and closers and adjectives and adverbs. And they were literally doing Little Red Riding Hood because he was 6, but they were needing to break down Little Red Riding Hood into adverbs and adjectives and openers and closers and nouns and verbs. I was just going, I swear I was 11 before I learned this stuff. And I don't think I understood it when I was 11. And he was learning times tables at 6 as well, which I was going, I know that I was a good 9 before I started learning times tables.
Where's the
And
fun?
yeah, this was it. I was like, see, one of the things that I found, and again, we will go back to entering parenthood, but I will just make this quick point.
They've grown
So,
old very quickly again, haven't they?
I know. He left school when he was 6, just over 6. Oh, okay, that's fine. He left school when he was just over 6, and he is just now at 14 picking up books for fun. He's had 8 years where he would not. He would let me read to him, but he would not read to himself for fun, because of the way they taught him to read at school. He just kind of went, well, it's not fun. It's something that you have to do sometimes, but you don't
Similar
just.
similar things happen with my eldest, actually. I know we've gone off on a bit of a tangent, but we will come back to it. But this is very important because I'm speaking. So that just clicked in what I said there, didn't it? My oldest has had a very similar experience to that, and my oldest has now come out of school. He's 14, and came out of school a few months ago, and hadn't picked up a book in years, but always loved reading when he was younger. Always loved reading, but now he's. I think effectively they burnt him out from reading, and because all the passion and all the fun and all the enjoyment was sucked out of it, because what you do breaking down text and and all that he could never recognize, like questions like, what was the author thinking when they described the curtains being orange?
Yes.
And my head immediately, when I hear questions like that, my head immediately goes to the author probably wasn't thinking anything. Probably the author's curtains were orange, so he wrote orange. Not everything has a meaning and a subtext but school implies that there is. Yes. And then we over kind of evaluate things. But also he has had a huge passion for drawing for years, and going into a high school system where art was done in a very kind of similar kind of way, and you have to use certain materials and you have to do certain things, stop drawing. Completely stopped drawing. And it's only the last few months of being out of school that he started going back and doing drawing again and picking up a pencil again, because he's always done pencil and pen drawing, always line drawing, and he's really, really good at it, but using other materials he's not interested in. He doesn't want to. And he's got no intrinsic motivation to do those things, and there's no extrinsic motivation to make him do it. So therefore,
it doesn't happen.
He just stops everything. He took all the fun out of it, and I think that's indicative of school now, isn't it? But we have got fun.
Yes, yeah, and it's tricky. And we have done other talks more around education, so we'll leave that, and we'll probably do more
babies, Ruth, babies, back to babies.
I know, back to baby. I tell you what, I did want to ask you, and I know David Gray Hammond is doing a webinar about his experience of entering fatherhood in a couple of weeks. But I'm always curious, because obviously I was the one who was pregnant and carried the babies. What was your experience as a partner of watching your wife go through pregnancy? What was your experiences of pregnancy and birth and those quite extreme events?
I loved watching her body change. Absolutely loved watching her body change. That was a privilege and a real pleasure. And I don't mean that in a kind of sexual way. I just mean that in a kind of general. It was just amazing and incredible. It was a bit weird and creepy, thinking that there was a creature inside.
And that's
and we've got a friend who's kind of like very much not only has chosen not to have children, but is very kind of anti-babies and things like that, and loves our kids now that they're older. But when they were babies, it was like, no, keep away. Who kind of described pregnancy as having what's the word? Where you have like something that lives off of you.
Like a parasite.
A parasite. Babies is a parasite. And it is really, isn't it? Because it's sucking all of the nutrients from your body in. But anyway, I digress. So I love that aspect of it. There was obviously a lot of unknown as well. And I think actually having gone through, not personally, obviously gone through pregnancy 3 times, but being there when pregnancy has happened 3 times, seeing the differences in kind of how we were supported with the first one, with midwives and certain like breathing lessons and things and practice sessions and stuff like that. And then by the time we got to the 3rd one, it was a phone call and that was it, that was all you got. And there was nothing throughout the pregnancy at all. Also going through 3 very different types of birth as well. Because our first was induced, and that was kind of like a 14-hour pregnancy all told once everything was there. And then
14-hour
labor, sorry, not pregnancy. That would be a very quick pregnancy. I have no words this evening, as you probably guessed. I'm just rambling. My second one was a cesarean, So that was completely obviously different, actually going into theatre. But one of our best friends performed the cesarean, so we were really, really, really privileged with that. So that was actually quite, well, not for me because I wasn't getting cut open, but it was quite fun, and it was actually because it felt really safe having a familiar person in there. And then our third baby, Livy, was born like that. Came out super fast. So it's just three very, very, very different experiences, and all of them amazing. But actually, I think now, if I reflect back, apart from the middle one, because there was lots of actual calmness and things, and it was very controlled about what was happening, with our oldest and with our youngest, I don't actually remember much about the process of birth. And I think that's because I was completely overwhelmed both times. Not to say that they were negative experiences, but they were incredibly sensorial, kind of overwhelming experiences, emotional overwhelming experiences, and obviously I wasn't the one giving birth, so that was more so for Michelle. But for me, it was hard. I think is a nice way to put it. Is the best way to put it.
I think birth is hard for partners because for the person giving birth, you're doing something. And for the partners, it can be quite passive, but at the same time, you're watching a person who you care about greatly go through something very extreme.
Yes.
And that in itself can be quite challenging.
Yeah.
For those of you that don't know, I'm also an antenatal teacher. When I'm not doing Autistic Parents UK stuff, I'm doing antenatal teacher stuff. So this is another one of my little passions that I'm really into. Interestingly, there on the parasite comment, I would say that babies are more of a symbiote because they do have a positive effect.
Yeah.
So there's actually blood from the baby will mingle with the pregnant person's blood, and their genes can still be found in your system decades and decades later, and they make differences to your brain, they make differences to your heart, they do all kinds of things. Women who give birth, or those assigned female at birth who give birth, have less chance of certain cancers and things as well. So there are positives.
So there are positives, yeah.
It isn't all just this tiny person sucking all the nutrients out.
That wasn't my opinion. I was just repeating somebody else's. But yeah,
there is some of that. Yeah.
I don't. Do you know? I think there was. This is going to sound like a really weird thing to say. There was an element of jealousy on my behalf because I felt, like I'm there listening to someone's belly, trying to listen to heartbeats and things, or missing kicks and things, like all of that, and talking to someone's stomach, which is bulging, and it's very abstract and very attached in a lot of ways. So connecting with that was really difficult. When the babies were born, I think that was a very different thing. For me, it was a very different thing because I think I've taken to parenting quite well and quite quickly. It's like a natural habitat for me to be around kids, and it's that's just something that kind of fell into place for me. And it's been actually for my wife, it was a lot harder because I think there was a lot of other stuff going on there. But yeah, that abstractness of it, I was quite jealous of. And because she was experiencing something that I couldn't, and she was having a connection with a life that I wanted to connect with but couldn't really because there was always a barrier there, and that was quite hard for me.
Yeah, there is a saying that the person carrying the baby becomes a parent the day they find out that they're carrying the baby, and the partner becomes a parent the day that the baby's born, for that kind of thing. But I see it's funny because in like the birth world, there can sometimes be derogatory conversations around how much money new parents spend on gadgets that they almost definitely won't need. And I do get that. But I think quite a bit of it is that esotericness that actually we brought a whole load of stuff that we didn't use with our first. And it was that whole like making something surreal more real, making a concept into reality. There's now a space in my house that has a bed and a wardrobe and a changing table and a whole load of crap that I will never need. But it means that like my brain was allowed to give it space because there was space in my house, kind of thing. Because it is odd.
That is something that I think helps the transition as well. into, again, that kind of abstractness. And I know it's a comment just came up just before around the kind of the pictures and the ultrasounds and things bringing more reality to it. Actually, for me, that it didn't bring any more reality to it,
Right.
because it was just something happening on the screen, and it was,
Yeah.
still that I think I'm someone that often needs quite a lot of concreteness, and I
Yeah.
couldn't have any concreteness because I couldn't see the baby, like literally
Yeah.
wasn't there, and I couldn't touch it, and I couldn't feel it, and I couldn't do anything with it. So I'd really, really resonate with what you said there about kind of that filling of that space, because that was something that, it also was something useful that I could do, was
Yeah.
to fill that space, but also knowing that there was a space there kind of made it more real, even though I could see my wife with a bump and stuff was
Yes.
happening and the baby was very clearly there, but actually creating that space made me feel part of something,
Yeah.
that I wasn't detached to, because it was something that I could actually put my hands on and do.
Yes. Yes. It is that solidifying, isn't it? You're kind of taking a concept,
Yeah.
this two lines on a test somewhere, and
Yeah.
going, oh, now this is a real thing. Yeah. Yeah. Victoria's put, I struggled being pregnant. Oh, hang on a second. Sorry, another comment's come in. It moved it. Sensorily overwhelming. I didn't connect the baby I was carrying until I gave birth. Then there was a connection. Yeah, which again, Victoria, really, really common, because it is quite overwhelming being pregnant. Because kind of in that first trimester, for a lot of people, the main thing that you feel is sick all the time. And then once you start getting into the second trimester, I mean, it depends. I think that there is actually some research that autistic people are more prone to hyperemesis and hyperemesis gravidum, like morning sickness that doesn't stop, basically. So for some of us, the sickness will stop or reduce. For some of us, it won't. But then it will be mixed in with the movements of the baby as well, which it's really weird feeling a small person inside you. It is very and quite yeah, it can be quite overwhelming. What I found helpful with mine was talking to them, especially as they got bigger, and it wasn't just like, at the beginning it kind of feels like, but do you know what, it feels a little bit like you're going to have a really big fart and then you don't fart, but that funny little bubbly feeling that you get in your tummy, that's actually what it feels like really early on when you feel the baby move. And then as they get bigger, you actually feel punches and kicks and them rolling around and the whole thing. And when they got, I didn't mind the little ones, but the big ones, sometimes it was quite uncomfortable. And actually just kind of talking to them and saying, could you calm this down a little bit, because it's a little bit wild, I found helpful.
I had that film in my head, Victoria, when I was when Ruth was talking, and now that you put that, yeah, I think that's what that was based on. Though I think they based the alien in Alien.
Oh yeah,
on pregnancy and birth, and there were lots of those motives there. And obviously, Sigourney Weaver was the mother, wasn't she? And
yes,
there's a lot of that in there. But yeah,
yeah,
I can't even begin to imagine that though. That's the hard thing from my perspective as the dad's perspective. I can't imagine what it's like to have something
no,
in you, living in you that gets bigger and bigger, and then really creepily you expand
yeah.
like you're going to explode, and then obviously it comes out, and that's rather painful. And that none of how could I possibly connect with any of that? Even if you give analogies, it's not good enough, is it? It's
no, because it is a thing unto itself. And to be honest, it is different for everybody, and it will be different with different pregnancies, and then different, even, I'm in a few groups for pregnant autistic people. Not that I plan on ever being pregnant again. Most definitely not. 4 babies is a lot of babies. But as an antenatal teacher, basically, and someone who's had 4 babies, to try and be useful. And you can see, some people, like, it's amazing. They love it. It's majority of it is a really positive experience. Some people really, really struggle with the whole thing, even if they really want the baby, they really tried for the baby, but actually the experience of being pregnant can be really hard, because your whole body gets more sensitive, and those strange sensations, and it can all feel quite esoteric. It can feel a bit like, what's this for, is the baby even real? And yeah, yeah, and a few people putting having traumatic pregnancies, and then having difficult births as well. And again, it's hard because it depends what people study. I strongly suspect that autistic people are more prone to having difficult births and experiencing trauma in with their birth experience. I mean, I know this is really depressing, but statistically, we're at a point where anybody travelling through the maternity system in the UK, 70% of people leave with symptoms of PTSD. It's really, really high, and that's not separated by neurotype. That's just how many people. It's really, really massive. Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. You've made a really good point there. That the comment that just come in, that having a difficult time the first time meant that next time they were actually much more scared going into labour, because you don't know if you're going
don't know
to
what to expect.
Yeah. And again, sometimes it can. There are genetic elements to labour, so there will be similarities with labour, but sometimes they can be exactly as you were saying there, night and day, entirely different with your birth experience.
I guess it makes that argument of having more, because you experience lots of different types, and
yeah,
well, the law of averages, one of them is maybe going to be a good experience, isn't it? And actually, that was kind of, like I said with the middle one, that was our really, really good experience. But they were 3 completely different pregnancies and 3 completely different births, and the post experience was 3 completely different post experiences as well. So that's, I think, is one of the hardest things, that for a type of human that really, really, really finds prediction really, really important. You can't predict anything. It changes on a day-to-day basis. It changes, like anything could happen, and it's you can't control any of it. You can't really plan for any of it. And like anybody that's having their first, anyone that's coming into having their first baby, if you have a birth plan, it will not be worth the paper it's written on, because something will happen that will just veer it off in a different direction, and then you lose control over what's happening.
Yes, and that can be really hard, can't it? Yeah. One of the things that I say to my clients is to not make one birth plan, make at least 4.
Have backups.
So that you've planned for, most people, not everybody, and not everybody has that luxury, but a lot of people start off with something along the lines of a water birth, a bit of gas and air, and foresee kind of a fairly straightforward spontaneous physiological birth, but especially for first births, and especially if you are birthing outside of your home, that actually is very likely to happen. And so make a plan for inductions, make a plan for, even if it starts off physiologically, what if your healthcare professionals recommend that it's sped up, which is called augmentation. What are you going to do then? Make a plan for if you beg for the epidural, or make a plan for if it's a cesarean, so that you've thought through what all your options are. Because exactly, especially for people like us, thinking through means that then when your healthcare professionals say, actually, I don't think that this is going to go the way you want it to go, and we would be looking at a cesarean, you can go, okay, that's cool, this is my cesarean plan. Do this, rather than going, oh,
what do I do now?
What? Because I was expecting Baromanilow while somebody drip fed me grapes,
That was very specific.
Well, I mean, I've had 4 babies. Actually, I didn't have Baromanilow in any of them. Actually, I had 4 quite different experiences as well, but for me, what made a big difference in my birth was that with each pregnancy, I became more and more informed. And with each pregnancy, I became more and more stroppy. And so I would just, by my 4th pregnancy, I was just saying no to most things. And by then, I'd done my degree. So I was saying no, and I was citing the evidence of why I was saying no. And the midwives were kind of going, oh, all right then. But I knew that it was coming from a privileged place. It was coming from a place where I could cite studies, and that I was a middle-aged white person. And when they came out to my house, it was like, oh, look, it's just a normal house with healthy children in it. All of that kind of stuff, which meant that they did just kind of go, oh, all right, then you can just have those things. All right. And I know that for some people, they don't have that luxury at all.
No. And that's, I mean, post-pregnancy, the midwife visits and the health visitor visits, which don't really happen now, but did used to happen. They were actually the scariest thing, because that's where you felt the pressure to go running around, tidy your house up, and
Yeah.
making sure that you didn't have pre-made bottles of formula in the fridge, and that everything was made fresh when they were there, and all of that kind of stuff. You know, like all the stuff that now goes out of the window when you have your second and your third, especially with that first one. You felt that pressure of someone's coming to observe you, someone's coming to watch you.
Yes.
They're gonna pick
Yes.
on what you're doing, and I don't necessarily know that they would have done, but obviously you perceive that that's what's going to happen, don't you? And
There is that, and certainly when you talk, what I find this, when I talk one-on-one with midwives, with health visitors, it's very rare to come across a bastard.
yeah,
Mostly they're lovely, but then I talk to people on the other end, and that isn't always what comes across. And there is that pressure of monitoring and observation, and that these people do have a bit of power, that if they say to social services XYZ is going on, social services are going to take that seriously because it's coming from a healthcare professional. And so yeah, absolutely, that is that. I know one of the things with my first was that as I discovered with all of my babies, actually, he would not sleep if he wasn't touching me, which actually for anybody who isn't yet a parent or is newly entering parenthood, that's actually really normal for all babies. It isn't even an autistic babies thing. Babies expect to be touching you. And I, showed the health visitor his crib that he never slept in. And of course, yes, that's I put him back to sleep, and I put him feet to foot, and of course that's where he sleeps for approximately 3.5 seconds until he notices that I put him down, and then I pick him up and he sleeps in my bed for the rest of the night because I really like sleep. But yeah, not saying that to health visitors. And it took until my third till I was just like, no, he sleeps in my bed. And they kind of did and I went, okay, I'll quote the studies at you if you like he sleeps in my bed because otherwise we're not getting any sleep. But for me, because I've said this before, haven't I? I'm a massive fawner with healthcare professionals. And so the only way I can get around it is to get myself cross. I have to be angry enough to say no.
and then you can
Otherwise,
stand up.
I just say yes and go, okay.
Angry and armed. That's the important thing. Not just getting angry, but actually being armed with something to fight back with and to kind of defend yourself with. And I don't mean a sword. I mean like information or statistics or our research or whatever that kind of proves whatever it is that you're. And then they back down. It's so interesting, isn't it? That there's such an agenda there, isn't there? I mean, even the around kind of breastfeeding and stuff. I mean, with our first, the experience of breastfeeding with our oldest for Michelle was traumatizing. She literally had come out of theatre after having a 4th-degree tear, and then there they were with this baby on it. She couldn't feel her legs. She was in pain. She was exhausted. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. And then 20 minutes later, they kicked me out of the hospital.
Right.
So she was left on her own, had never had anything to do with babies before, like never even, like not even had friends who'd had babies or anything. She was an only child, had never been. And then she was just left with this thing that was starving hungry and didn't know what to do and didn't get the right support with it. And it was all very snippy and fairly aggressive, I would say, like you're not doing it right and let me hold them for you and taking over and all of that kind of thing. And so with our second child, she didn't even try breastfeeding at all. She didn't want to. And then by the time it got to the third, she wanted to try again, but the other two, because we had 3 under 5, so the other two didn't really let her because they were very jealous. so it never worked out for her, and she's still quite traumatized by that first experience now. And it's still there. It still lingers that she wishes she breaks herself because she wishes she could go back and do it because she wanted to, but they actually took that opportunity away from her rather than helping her.
Super common, and absolutely breastfeeding grief is real. That it can be that And it can be either way. It can actually be meeting your goals, but not doing it in the way that you wanted, not receiving the support that you wanted, finding it very challenging, or not being able to reach your goal because you're not given sufficient support. And actually, I have to say, we're particularly crap in the UK. We have the lowest breastfeeding rates in the world. We
But I
are.
think part of that is the enforcement agenda of it as well, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because with our second, because of where he was born, there's a midwife specialist centre where people can go, and it's like midwife run unit and things, and so there's wards there and things where you can go and recuperate for a few days after you've had your baby, and it's like a nice experience and things. She wasn't allowed food from the midwife centre because she wasn't breastfeeding. So I had to bring in food. So she was allowed to stay in the bed in the room with the baby, but I had to bring in food from outside because she wasn't breastfeeding. So therefore she wasn't eligible to
So
have
she
like
didn't need
toast,
any milk.
you know?
It wasn't like she'd just given birth
No.
and so needed to replenish what her body had just lost. No. She's absolutely, she can just starve because she's giving her baby formula. It's bonkers. And there's lots of, so in the UK, doctors, midwives, health visitors, none of them have mandatory feeding training, none of them. So some of them might have chosen to, and certainly there are doctors and midwives and health visitors out there that give really excellent support and really excellent advice, but unfortunately there are quite a few out there that don't. Any amount of forcing a baby onto the breast, telling people that they're doing it wrong, insisting on holding the baby is just not, it's not how you
Not
do
good practice, no.
it's not good practice. And absolutely then what we end up with is somebody who's lost confidence, and then they're told, oh, baby's lost X amount of weight, you can't leave, or you'll need to go back in, and so they top up with formula, and then once you start doing that, it's very hard to stop. None of this is to be a downer on formula. If people choose to formula feed, if people want to formula feed, it's absolutely fine. That's what it's there for. But it's for the people that don't want to and aren't given the right support to reach their own goals. And as I say, we're crap. It's a UK thing. They actually have better breastfeeding rates in America, despite the fact that they have no mandatory maternity leave at all. And they still do it better than we do. I mean,
think as well that
people pay for it, but
that's kind of that's setting mums up to fail first of all, isn't it? And that in terms of kind of, you're not a good enough person. You're not good at what you do. You're not a good enough mother. You're not able to do what mother should naturally be able to do. And that's the beginnings of your relationship with your child. If you set up that scenario. And I remember at the time, like from my perspective, that frustration of, I'm watching my wife struggle with something she shouldn't have to struggle with, not getting the right support. But yet if I go and talk to one about it, I had to consciously kind of self-monitor, written a whole book about that, and manage myself in order to not come across as aggressive. And because I was upset and I was angry and I was emotional because he's my baby that I want to enjoy and have an amazing start with. And all of a sudden it's wrapped up around all this trauma that's unnecessary, that's just being handed by bucket load to my wife. And that was one of the hardest things. And I would say with our youngest, that spoiled, even though obviously she ended up going to theatre and things, there were lots of negative things that happened. The thing that spoiled his birth was the breastfeeding.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't have to say that, should you?
No. We're not. So I don't think our maternity, like the whole perinatal period, I don't think our services here in the UK are very good at meeting anybody's needs. But when you factor being autistic into it, it really increases that struggling to meet people's needs. Because actually I would say that undermining of trusting your body starts right at the beginning of pregnancy. It actually starts with, but we just need to check this, but we just need to check that, but we just need to do this. I've had clients, for example, who conceived with IVF. I had some clients, this was amazing, I had some clients who actually had a video of the conception of their baby, like sperm meeting egg, multiplying into a zygote. Absolutely
That's incredible.
Oh, I mean, it was absolutely and to see it, because they showed it to me in the postnatal session, so the baby was there, which is just amazing. I mean, mind you, I messaged my partner and said, "Oh my God, some of my clients have just shown me the conception of their baby," and he was like, "What? No, 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 IVF, not that kind of conception of their baby. That would be a step too far." So,
Very
but
small
they,
camera as well.
I mean, indeed. But I've had clients, in fact, I've had quite a few clients who conceived with IVF, and then when they've gone and had their scan, they've moved the due date of their baby and said, "No, no, no, that's not when you got pregnant." They've gone, "But it was, because a doctor did it." Like, there's no debate about when we got pregnant. We can't be wrong because it was done.
We literally watched it happen.
Like exactly, like it wasn't like, "Oh, actually, we did have loads of tequila. Maybe it was the night before."
Uh-huh.
There's no debate, and it's that, and we do it all the time. "Oh no, but the machine knows better than you do, so we'll just move that date," and then something, something, something. We niggle away, and the feeding just feeds into what's already been laid down. I'm going to come to some of the comments because I can rant about these things, and I'm going to try really hard not to rant.
While you're looking at the comments, I'm going to
Yes.
say something really. I'm going to ask you something really weird. Okay.
Okay.
Can you relate the characteristics of your individual children to the pregnancy? To the pregnancies that you have with them and the birth that you have with them as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
It's
Particularly
like my eldest procrastinates and drags his feet at everything. Like, and he was the one that took ages to come out and needed to be induced. My middle one was literally didn't have to do any work because it was a cesarean, and now he still doesn't do any work. It's like he's so laid back. And then the youngest is like running around at 4,000 miles an hour and came out very, very, very quickly. It's
that's
just
the same. Yeah. Yeah,
bizarre.
there's definitely something in my second. So my second was breech for ages. She didn't
Hmm.
turn until I think about 38 weeks, and we had to manually turn her, although fortunately it worked very quickly. But and I remember one day towards the end of the pregnancy, where she was still breech, her repeatedly trying to stand up. So she had her feet on my cervix and her head in my diaphragm, and just spent the whole day doing this, to the point that I had to, like, "Please stop, baby, please. You cannot just kick your way out." But now that you meet her, you would absolutely try and just kick your way out. That is 100% what you were trying to do. You've just gone, "I've had enough of this shit. Excuse me, where's the manager?" That's what she's waiting for. And was just trying to just kick her way out. my, my third and fourth, easier pregnancies and easier births, though, as I say, that's probably because I got more stroppy. I don't know, my fourth was a very, very, very quick birth. Yeah, she's very energetic. She's probably the most stereotypical ADHD
Mhm.
of all my kids that she has. Although I find it very hard because she's 5, and I'm like, what 5-year-old isn't like
Isn't very
this?
excitable. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so there are definitely elements. So Ash, kind of relating to what you were saying with Michelle there, Kieran, the day I was told before I knew better to stop breastfeeding was the day my postnatal depression kicked in. Ash, I'm really sorry to hear that. Bobby, wonderful comment. So Bobby saying that she breastfed both of hers and still experienced what was diagnosed as postnatal depression, but actually was autistic burnout. I'm sure I've mentioned it in lives before because it's something that I'm becoming increasingly confident on.
We've talked
Is,
about this before, haven't we?
yeah, autistic people being diagnosed with postnatal depression, and it's autistic burnout, or potentially both autistic burnout and postnatal depression, but the treatment for the postnatal depression can make the burnout worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Millie saying breastfeeding support worker in hospital offered suggestions, nothing worked, so she just gave up and left. Yeah, again, unfortunately, not a rare occurrence. Victoria, again, really fantastic comment there, Victoria. I know now I'm touch averse, and it was nothing to do with not loving or caring for my baby because you didn't know you were autistic. Yeah. One thing I really struggled with, because I did manage to breastfeed all of mine, and I've done extended feeding with all of mine, or natural term feeding with all of mine. I've let them stop feeding when they feel ready to. So it means twice I've done tandem feeding, that I've been feeding two lots of babies, particularly with my third and fourth. I started to get like, I can only borderline cope with this, and it has to be dark, and nobody can talk to me, and it has to stop really quickly, and then I have to just go and have a shower, because it was really, really intense. And it was only that whole, I don't know if you've done this with other things, Kieran. I realise you haven't specifically done this with breastfeeding, but when you set out like, I'm going to do this thing, it's like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it, despite the fact that I'm starting to
I'm on fire.
control of my body. I told myself I'm going to do it, so I'm just going to go through it. But yeah, it was. And I think if I'd known I was autistic, I would have been kinder to myself, and probably not force myself to battle through it. Yeah.
I think there is the. I mean, obviously, I didn't have to go through pregnancy and didn't have to go through birth and breastfeeding, but I am incredibly touch averse, and having a baby complicated that particularly. Because, as dads, we're encouraged to have skin on skin, and there is a lot of touching involved of flesh.
Yeah.
And had I gone and put a pair of medical gloves on every time I handled the baby, that would have looked a little bit strange. And I wouldn't do that now. But there has been a lot of me having, and still does, because my kids love cuddles.
Yeah.
But it hurts when they touch me, so I've still had to push through, and that sensory aspect of that has been enormous. And I mean, there's other sensory aspects as well around, obviously, the noise. Babies are not quiet things.
No.
They scream a lot and cry a lot, and you have to change how you are, because it's kind of, I mean, again, with kind of the second and third, it was a lot easier, but with the first, it was like, the baby's asleep, nobody can speak while the baby's asleep, no noise must be had. And and when you're a person that stomps around all the time and clumps things, and that's a big change for you to have to kind of deal with, and the ins and the outs change in terms of sensory stuff, and that's really hard to transition through.
Yeah, very much so. One of the things that I end up talking to clients about, because I wish someone had given me permission, was, that you can comfort your baby when they cry, and you don't have to listen. It's okay to put earplugs in or put headphones on or whatever, because you're still meeting their need, but you're also meeting your need at the same time. Like, we're literally biologically programmed as human beings to find it enormously stressful to listen to babies crying. And so you just don't have to. It's all right to just block that noise out and still comfort your baby. Your baby isn't going to know, and you're definitely not damaging them. And I felt so guilty that I found his cries very challenging. Fortunately, my first was a very easy baby. This was partly why I had 4 babies, was because my first was very easy. So I was like, oh, it's fine. Parenting's fine. But although it's funny, I say that, he just needed to be carried all the time. And as long as I never put him down and I never stopped touching him, he was a fairly happy baby. But I didn't mind that too much. It was okay for me. We were a good match. But yeah, I wish somebody had told me, you can just listen to music and still cuddle your baby, and it's all right. You don't have to. I felt like I was a bad parent if I blocked out the noise.
Yeah. Do you know, one of the nicest memories I have of when they were babies is just them being asleep in my lap.
Yeah.
And then, like, because everything's obviously so stressful, especially when you have your first and eke into your second, everything is like, has to happen now, and everything goes wrong, and you feel like you never get a chance to sit. And those were like just times where everything was calm and still. And I quite often used to watch horror films, like, on my phone while they were asleep while he was asleep in my lap, and it was just a nice time to be close to him. But not be in physical well, he was in physical contact because he was on me, but through clothes and things like that, and have that pressure but not have the touch that went with it. But also just to do something for me at the same time as well. It was just nice.
Yeah, I think that there's quite nice, it's like a weighted blanket, isn't it? It's one of the things that I actually like about my other job is after they have the babies, I go and meet them, and I'll just take it, I'll just go from baby to baby to baby to baby to baby, because I actually quite like that weight of a baby in my arms. It feels, this is probably again why I ended up, I'll just have one more. um but it's not, it's that proprioceptive input. It does actually give you a nice feel of the weight, but absolutely there are, I find it easier when they're asleep because they're much more still. They've got wet little hands, haven't they? Wet little hands on your skin can be quite tricky. Yeah.
Like my whole insides have just turned
Just went,
inside out.
oh, baby
The
hands.
clamminess of it, and the but even things like, like people are like, oh, babies smell lovely. Babies do not smell lovely to me.
I do quite like the smell of baby.
It's like after you've washed them with Johnson's and Johnson's No More Tears, maybe they smell nice, but the smell of
You
poo
like
and
the smell of
sweat,
stuff.
and they have a very specific smell, and it's not something that I find pleasant, and but even looking at them, like people are always saying babies are so cute and love, they look like Brussels sprouts. They
Oh
do look
yeah.
like Brussels sprouts, and Brussels
Yeah.
sprouts are not attractive things to look at.
No,
And
no.
it's,
Yeah,
I
little
think, I think that was
broken
one of the
ribs.
things that I found hard to correlate. That everyone was
Right.
oohing and ahhing, and isn't it lovely? And I'm like, it's noisy. It poos all the time. It's constantly hungry, and I'm talking about my son like he's in it. It's not in it. But in that kind of context, again, it was just very much like, I don't know how everybody is thinking like this, because I'm seeing something completely different to them, which is actually invading lots of aspects of my life in a very not nice way, in a very uncomfortable kind of way.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I found really hard with babies, and actually I have to say it gets a little bit less as they get older, but it doesn't stop, is not being able to finish stuff. Just that autistic need that if I'm doing a task,
Mm-hmm.
I just want to do the task from the beginning to the
The
end.
end.
And
Yeah.
then I probably want to have a little bit of staring into space time. And then I want to do another task. And starting a task and then needing to stop and starting it again and then needing to
Mm-hmm.
stop and starting it again and needing to
It
stop.
breaks your flow over and over and over and over, doesn't it?
And it's so
Even
hard.
going to the toilet.
Yeah, yeah. Just little things, not being able to shower as much as you
Yeah.
want to,
Yeah.
absolutely
Yeah.
struggling with going to the toilet, meeting those basic human needs, needing to make a sandwich, all of that kind of stuff, just stop and start, stop and start, stop and start. I find it really dysregulating.
Even you talking about that is making me anxious.
Right.
Isn't that's how much it kind of gets to you. It's so bizarre, and it's something that you cannot explain to people who don't have children, how much children change your life, but
Yeah.
especially as an autistic person, with so much that you so many things you put in place for yourself in order to just get through a day, even if you're not even leaving the house.
Yeah.
So much structure that you have around you, that you have to have around you, and then all of a sudden it's just all gone. All of
Yes.
it is gone, and you've got no way of getting it all back again. And it does come back to a certain extent, and then you do I think as they get older, you become more used to that level of interruption, and maybe you just kind of shut it out a little bit more. It's not to say that it doesn't impact you as much, and you get used to not having that structure about. But when you get to a certain age and you start maybe getting it back a little bit,
Yeah.
and then you can't have enough of it, it's still
Yes.
you, and then it's being kept from you. It's tangibly close, but you still can't grasp it. I mean, I've
Yeah.
got a 14, a 13-year-old, and a 10-year-old. So we're getting to that point just slightly now where it's kind of a grandparent. Well, they've only got one grandparent left for it, and but it's starting to take a little bit more interest because they're older and they're easier to look after.
Yes.
So Michelle and I are starting just like we might get one night a year with each other,
Yes.
away from the children. But then it's like you want more and more and more, and you
Yeah.
of that structure and of that time back that you had before, and then you can't get it because it's still being held away.
No,
It's so
no.
hard.
It's hard, isn't it? And actually, I don't know a solution for it. I've noticed so my partner and I are together and live together, which I realise not everybody has, but I do. And the last 2 nights he's been away. So he normally works from home, but about once a month he has to do a work thing. And then once a year he has to do this big conference work thing. So he's been away for 2 nights. And so normally he works at home, so in the day he's a bit accessible if things go bad, but he's mostly in here. But in the evening we will tag team, and so I can just go and cook dinner, or he can just go and cook dinner, and we will bat the children away from the person making dinner. And so for 2 nights I've just been getting so frazzled because I've got used to that luxury of, I can just, send an email, I can just cook dinner, I can just finish the chapter of my book, or whatever it is that I'm trying to do, because my partner will bat away the 3-minute interruptions from my kids. And not having him here, I've gone right back to that, like, that's what it was like when they were tiny. It was just that all the time. My first 2 babies, so this is another that you might find. My first 2, for the first 6 months, it was nobody but mama. Nobody. Don't touch me. Don't look at me. Definitely don't try and hold me. If you're not mama, I'm not interested. Which I know my partner found a bit challenging. 3 and 4, probably partly because they were 3 and 4, so they didn't have so much choice, but both of them were much more chilled. And unless I'm hungry, a human can hold me, and that's cool. And certainly daddy is fine. Did you find that your children, I am aware of the time, we will finish up in a minute. Did you find that?
I'm laughing. I'm still laughing at the first part of what you said, which is around each of you batting the children away from whoever's doing the thing
in a nasty way.
It's no. I'm not laughing at that so much. I'm laughing because it's the kind of there's an inverse happens in kind of our house. I find it easier when Michelle's not here, because I don't get interrupted and interfered with as much, because it's kind of like I can just do what I need to do in terms of, like, I mean, I do all the cooking anyway. Like, people always think I make it out that Michelle doesn't do anything. She does do lots, but I do a lot of the traditional mum parenting. Like I because I was a stay-at-home dad, so all the kids constantly just gravitate towards me and wanting things from me. So I've just naturally taken it on as I do stuff. Someone asks for a drink, I just get up and do it, kind of thing. And that's my kind of they've conditioned me, basically.
Yeah. Well,
so
this is
I
what
was
we
laughing
have.
at that.
The kids will literally walk past my partner.
Oh yeah.
And go, "Oh, mummy," and my partner will be like, "What? I'm right here. Just ask me." But yeah.
But yeah. No, that's exactly what happens in our house. They'll go the length of the house to come and ask me for something and walk past their mum.
Yeah.
But when they were younger, actually, it was kind of, no, it wasn't like that at all. All 3 of them, they weren't bothered if it was me or Michelle.
Okay.
It was they didn't really gravitate towards one or the other. But I think because Michelle didn't breastfeed, we both played an active part in the feeding. Maybe that's the difference there. We both played an active part in, and obviously once you're expressed, dad can obviously feed and things if you do it through the bottle. But because all 3 of them ended up being formula fed very quickly, then both of us were doing lots of the feeds, and I did most of the nighttime feeds because I was awake anyway.
Yeah.
Because I'm a person that's awake, or used to be a person that's awake at night. Now I collapse at 8 o'clock. But yeah, so it wasn't like that for us, but it definitely is like that now. It's kind of all 3 of them gravitate towards me for lots and lots of things, but actually they gravitate towards Michelle for other things.
Yeah.
It's strange. It's kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it?
Reverse roles.
Nature and nurture as well.
Yeah,
Of like, is it stuff that they've learned, or is there some kind of innate thing of which parent they go to for different things? Yes, it may well have been the feeding. I didn't express, because actually sensory wise, that is something I always found deeply unpleasant. I could cope with feeding a baby, but feeding a machine made me feel like a cow, and it wasn't okay for me. No. But yeah, I was having a quick look through the comments, but most of the comments are about children's bodily fluids, and so I will just say, yes, shockingly grim. Nobody warns you enough. the poos that
You know
literally.
what? Well, the poo, right? Right. This is the first time we should have had permission to
We
talk about poo for
actually
the
had
whole
a poo
session.
conversation.
Because the moment you become a parent, all you talk about is poo.
It's
It's
just
always what color is it? What consistency is it? How many times have you wiped it today? And that doesn't ever go away, even as they get older. You just still carry on talking about poo. But it's funny because, like, with our oldest particularly, there was a lot of regurgitation of milk. That happened a lot. But he would always do it when he was with me.
right.
So I'm feeding the baby, bleh, it would all come out, and I would be covered head to foot in it. But the smell of milky
Oh yeah.
vomit especially the formula because it's so sweet.
Yeah.
It's mm,
Yeah.
no.
No, no, no,
I
no.
would literally sit there just holding him like this, and Michelle would have to be like cleaning around me.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it, and I can't do
My
sick. I can't do sick now at all. I can do poo, but I can't do sick.
See, none of my children were particularly sicky, but my sister's second was massively sicky, and actually for years and years, even as an older child, if he got a little cough or a tickle,
You would vomit.
it would just come up really, really easily. And yeah, I'm just going to leave the room. I'm just going to walk away from that because that's just a little bit more than I can cope with.
And also,
Uh,
nobody prepares you for boys and and where that we can go
oh
and how
yeah,
far it can go as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I've swallowed baby wee. I've literally been peed in
Haven't
the
we
face.
all? I am talking about children for all the death
It's not adult wee.
No, a baby wee will just go everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, generally bodily fluids are going. And actually, there was quite a bit of talk there about snot as well. And I also agree. I even now my children are older, I still find it really hard when they have the kind of colds where it's just
Dripping.
gumping out. And then they all are like, Mummy, you hurt my nose every time you blow it. Because I'm trying to get rid of every last little bit. Well done. Dana has never been weighed on. You need some kind of parenting badge, Dana. Never been. It's like a
That's
Boy
like
Scout badge. Never
Dana
been.
must be a ninja.
Yeah.
Just with, like the dodging and the.
We'll do one last bit about poo and then we'll finish up. My second, with you saying about your eldest only being sick on you, my eldest would only would only poop for people that he trusted.
Mhm.
And so for a long time, it meant that he would only poop for me. And if he was with anybody else, he would just hold on to it. I mean, literally, I remember his childminder handing him over to me at the door, being about 18 months old, and him just going, oh, just
Everywhere.
wouldn't. And actually, it was a real kind of marker because my eldest is not biologically my current partner's. It was like a real marker in our relationship of when my eldest would poo for him. It was like, you've done it. You've done it. You've earned the daddy badge. He'll poo for you. You are a trusted human now.
So opposite of that story before we go, my eldest two, every time we had a visitor, would go straight for their potties, plonk themselves down in front of whoever the visitor was, and both would sit and poo at the same time while staring at the visitor. Literally, it was like having a little audience in front of you.
We will finish up there. Some of that conversation was actually about entering autistic parenthood, but experience has shown that if you mention poo to Kieran and I, we both have a multitude of poo stories.
You don't get a conversation like this with David Gray Hammond.
That's right. He's going to be completely respectable. Let me remind myself of his date, actually, as we finish up. I'm fairly sure it is the 12th that we have got David Gray Hammond. And of course, now I'm looking at our Facebook page and I can't see it, even though I know we've posted it on there. I'm reasonably confident that it is the 12th of September that David Gray Hammond will be joining us. So he'll be talking kind of around the same topic, but his own personal experience and talking about his experiences with postnatal mental health as well, which I think is going to be really, really interesting. So if you haven't already, please do get yourself an Eventbrite ticket for that, free for all of you guys, of course, and come and join us with David Gray-Hammond. Thank you so much to everybody who has joined us in the comments. Thank you to everybody who has come along with us. Hopefully there was, even if nothing but solidarity, hopefully there was some solidarity with you there. Kieran, this was lovely. Kieran and I will try and do this again soon. We've had a bonkers year, haven't we?
We've been terrible this year, haven't we?
We just keep going, are you free this month? Oh, I could do 35 seconds on one particular Thursday evening. Oh no, I'm busy on that Thursday evening. So we'll try and do another one really soon. If there's anything in particular that you want us to talk about, drop us a message and we'll talk about that. And we'll probably manage to work it round to put. Lovely to see you, dude. Take care.
See you later, everyone. Bye-bye.